We are on Zoom and we are recording our show and we're ready to go. So it's great to see everybody. It's been about almost a month. We usually take the month of August off and kind of refresh and recharge our batteries. Before that, over the pandemic, we had done about 180 virtual events between April of last year and July of this year. And so it was nice to get a second to take a breath and plan for the next few months and looking into even to 2022. So thank you for letting us take a little bit of a break. I hope you got to rest, relax, sit by the pool, have a drink, whatever you need to do the same. So, but we're thrilled to be back here and kind of kicking off our new season. I want to tell you about a few things that are coming up before we jump into tonight. On Monday night, that's the 30th of August, we're going to be doing another virtual chat. We're going to be talking with the wonderful poet Mary Jo Bang and the novelist Francine Prose will be in conversation with each other. So that's going to be really fun on Monday night. That's free and open to the public. You can sign up for that at magiccitybooks.com. And then we actually have a real event, person event outside on the beautiful Guthrie Green here in the Arts District, just down the street from the bookstore, with Joy Harjo, our U.S. Poet Laureate, for her new memoir, Poet Warrior, which is her second memoir and kind of takes off where Crazy Brave left us. And we're going to be doing that on September 7th. That's the day the book comes out, 7 o'clock on the Guthrie Green outside. Bring some blankets, bring some chairs, pack a picnic, come enjoy this conversation with Joy and spend some time with this amazing woman that we have living in our community here and representing Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the United States. So come out for that. And then the last thing I will say is tickets go on sale tomorrow for our virtual event with the one and only Anita Hill, Oklahoma's own Anita Hill. We're going to be chatting with her about her new book called Believing, which is 30 years after her unforgettable testimony. So looking back at that and seeing where we are and what progress has been made and what needs to be done still. So we're really looking forward to that conversation. So a lot of good stuff coming up. Go to the website, magiccitybooks.com, and you can see all of that. But let's get to tonight's event. I'm really thrilled. I have been spending so much time with this amazing book. I hope you guys will be doing the same. It's called The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. I think this is going to be a book that we're going to be talking about, not just for this year, but for years to come. And I think it's going to be on all the big lists and award considerations at the end of this year. It's been a true journey, as you know, to go into this book. It's something you want to kind of almost like tuck under your pillow at night and spend some time with. So even when you're not reading it, you're kind of absorbing it through osmosis. And we're about this, but I have known the work of Professor Honorée Fanonne Jeffers for some time, but known her solely as a poet and a wonderful poet, and known that she was just down the road in Norman teaching creative writing at the University of Oklahoma. And I was thinking, how is this a person that we have in this state? And I've never actually met her in person, but just how lucky are we to have these amazing minds? I mentioned Joy Harjo, have these amazing women here in Oklahoma doing all of this wonderful work. And so I was kind of thinking the last book she put out, The Age of Phyllis, which is this amazing book, kind of centering around the poet Phyllis Wheatley. If you don't know Phyllis Wheatley, you should definitely Google that. But that book was kind of a phenomenon in of itself and was long listed for the National Book Award in poetry. And so I was so thrilled about that. And then I heard that she was putting out a new book, and I of course assumed it was going to be another poetry collection. And then boom, this thing drops into our lives as such a gift and such a moment that we will not forget. So we will talk about this week, what that's been like. We're going to ask you guys to ask. So if you do have questions, please put them into our Q&A here. And most importantly, we're going to put links here in the chat so you can buy a copy of this book. And I want you guys to buy it because we know this book's going to be on the big bestseller list, like those big ones. We won't jinx it, but it's going to be on some big numbers next week. But let's make Honorée Fanonne Jeffers the #1 bestseller in Oklahoma, so that next week when that list comes out in all the papers, this book, The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, is #1. And you guys can make that happen by buying a copy or multiple copies tonight. So thank you very much. And I want to say a big, big welcome to our very special guest, Professor Honorée Fanonne Jeffers. Welcome.
Thank you so much. You got me blushing here.
That's not just because it's 100 degrees outside.
No, not because of that. Just, just the warm, kind welcome. It just feels good. This is actually my first Oklahoma book event.
You mean ever or for this book?
Ever.
Ever. Wow. Well, and I'm so sorry, you know, of course we were planning to do this in person, but you know, I'm glad we live
Yes, and I would have loved to have done so. And I was supposed to be, you know, with this Delta variant, just has no respect.
But good. We live in an age where we can still do this. That's the we're living.
Yes, and that's the good thing. But I do hope at some point that I can come to Magic City Books and meet the people, because you write for the people. You know,
we hope so.
You know,
well, there's so much to say.
Also, let me tell people, I'm drinking pineapple juice. This is not a drink. Okay, so when you see me sipping this, please do not think I'm getting, you know, tasty in the middle of a book event. Okay.
Yes, thank you for that disclaimer.
Go ahead.
So I'm curious, you know, there's so much to say here, but what I don't want to do is, I think you're probably already kind of sick of talking about kind of the scope of the work, because everybody, the first thing I think people have talked about is like, it's this epic, and they talk about.
I'm actually not tired of that, but if you want to. But if you want to talk about something else, you know, I'm always interested in, you know, I'm a creative writing and literature professor, so I'm always interested in different. So you do you.
Well, what I'm curious about first is, I've known your work, like I said, solely as a poet, and this is your first novel. And of course, it's I think will kind of be this landmark book when we're all is said and done. But I'm curious, having been publishing, you know, what, for the past quarter century or so.
24 years. My first poem came out in 1997.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So I was curious, how do you consider yourself now that this book is out? Do you think of yourself, because a poet is very much an identity. A lot of people are writers, but a poet in the hierarchy of writing is very much a certain identity. Do you consider yourself a poet first? Are you a writer? Are you a novelist? Are you an author? Like, how do you kind of define yourself in that space?
Well, my mentor, the great Lucille Clifton, my mentor, second mother and dear friend, and I am blessed to have a relationship with her children as well. I remember once I was in the audience when she said, "Always be open to the word." Okay, however the word comes to you. So it wasn't until Tuesday that I felt comfortable calling myself a novelist, right? Because, you know, I'm African-American, so we always think somebody gonna, you know, play the Lucy and Charlie Brown football game with us, right? But when I was on Good Morning America, I saw Miss Oprah flash on the screen. I said, okay, they can't take it back now, right? But I will always be a poet. The poems come to me, even when, you know, I don't try to write poetry. That's how I started writing poetry. They came to me in dreams. And so therefore, I will always be a poet, but I am an essayist as well. And so I just embrace this. And that is part of the African-American tradition. There have always been multi-genre writers in the African-American tradition. So I'm just, you know, I'm just continuing in that position.
Yeah.
That tradition, rather.
Since you mentioned it, you know, of course, we cannot not mention this thing that happened this week, which was this wonderful book getting picked by Oprah's book club. And in some ways, that's, you know, it's a life-changing thing. And I'm sure that obviously you knew about it before it happened, but
yes, I did.
What was the most like for you when you found out? That I'm just curious, you know, did your editor call you? Did your agent tell? How did you find it out?
Miss Oprah called me. I was at home, chilling in my bed, and it was evening. You know, there's some things I can't talk about, but this I can talk about. They already asked me on CBS this morning. So I see this unknown number. It said unknown number pop up on my phone. And, you know, now if this was 10 years ago, I would have thought it was a bill collector, but I have pretty good credit now. I've worked on it, you know, for years. So I said, well, I know this ain't a bill collector. Who is this, right? So I thought maybe it was a telemarketer, but I also thought it might be a couple free obnoxious, I'm in my 50s, right? Obnoxious ex-boyfriends. So I said, I'm just going to ignore this. People you don't want to talk about have been reaching out during the pandemic, right? So I just ignored it. Then it came up again, and I got cranky. So I picked up the phone, I answered the phone and I said, hello, like real nasty. And this voice said, may I speak to Honorée Fanonne Jeffers? And I said, with whom am I speaking? And the voice said, is this Honorée Jeffers? And I said, with whom am I speaking? I'm not exaggerating, because I've thought about this, right? And so the voice said, is this Honorée Jeffers? I said, yes, it is. Who is this? And the voice said, this is Oprah Winfrey. And I said, no, it's not. And the voice said, yes, it is. And I said, no, it's not. Stop playing on my phone. And then she got that sound that we all know. And she said, this is Oprah Winfrey, Professor Jeffers. And I said, oh my God. Oh my God. And I just kept going on and on. Oh my God. And then I said, wait, let me get myself together. And she said, you are already together because you wrote a beautiful novel, and I am choosing the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois for the Oprah Winfrey Book Club. And then I started crying like a fool. I cried. I'm getting choked up right now. I cried. And then I said, God is so good. Yeah. And she said, all the time. Yeah. And it was a short conversation, but she has that gravitas, that I grew up with Black women who have accomplished things, and church mothers and those kind of people, right? So it was just lovely, because I wrote this book as a love letter to Black women, and to have this Black woman who I have admired since I was a very young girl, to choose me, it just feels, it's not, certainly it's it's hopefully selling a lot of books, but it's also just a great cultural. She's from the Deep South, as I am. And she made me believe that so much was possible for me, So yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful moment. It took me probably about two weeks to really stop feeling like I had some kind of break, some kind of break. I'm not trying to make fun of people who experience mental health issues. I was just like, did that really happen? And then,
Yeah, because what's so special about that, and like you said, of course, it's going to move some books, but what it does is it opens doors to audiences that would not be there. And
that's
so beyond the selling, you're gonna, because you write this book, you sit in the room and you write it, you don't know who's going to read it. You hope people will read it, but there are people that this will reach because of that amplification that just never would have, and it's going to reach certain demographics of people that would have never read it. So just
a diverse.
Yeah.
One of the things is that the Pew Center did a study that came out in 2014, saying that the #1 reader was a college-educated Black woman. That shocked a lot of people. But we Black women read everybody, right? But at the same time, I don't, just because I wrote about my culture, and of course, I want my people in my culture to read it. I want everybody to read it. I want white people, Asian people, Latinx people, Native Americans, particularly Native Americans,
yes.
Right? I want everybody to read the book. And I hope that there's something that I can offer. I'm in a tradition where it's not simply the art. It's also, at my age, at 54, how can I help somebody? And how can I help? It's not just a love letter. It's one, a love letter to Black women, two, a love letter to this nation.
Yeah.
You know, that we are all in this thing together, and we're going to fall together, or we're going to continue together. So, you know, knowing that I wanted to do that, to have Miss Oprah, you know, I don't feel comfortable calling her Oprah. She told me to call her Oprah, but I just call her Miss Oprah, and she stopped, you know. But to have Miss Oprah do that, knowing that she has such a broad reach, right, of Americans, and that Americans of all backgrounds have loved her and felt, put a lot of trust in her, that to me is very profound for this book, because I want Americans to gain something from the book.
So I want to touch on what you said there a moment ago about kind of the with Native culture also in the history as well, and the kind of overlapping of the two in the book. That's a very part of this kind of canvas that you've painted. But I'd like to begin by talking about, or maybe have you introduce Ailey Pearl Garfield to us and tell us who she is and how you kind of landed on her as kind of the way through this, because this is a big landscape and you needed a guide of sorts.
Right.
So maybe the best way to kind of, because someone was at, we've had a few questions so far saying, how did this story come to you, or describe the story? And it's very much, it's hard to describe, of course, in a very short soundbite, but tell us who Ailey is and how she came to you.
Well, Ailey Pearl Garfield is the youngest child of Belle, of Dr. Jeff and Mrs. Belle Garfield. And she is a child of African-American privilege. I chose a child of African-American privilege for a reason. Similar to Du Bois, who was able to move between worlds. He was the first African-American to earn a doctorate from Harvard University. But what many people don't know is that he came from very poor origins. So he moved through these sort of worlds. And I wanted to have a protagonist to move through these worlds. But I also wanted a protagonist who would grow as the narrative grew. And as the narrative sort of, you know, as you've mentioned, there's an expansive sort of aspect to the story, to the novel. I wanted to have someone who we could see grow, because what happens is that, you know, we don't view young Black women as important, as valuable in this country. And so that's why I picked a little Black girl who would then grow, right? The other thing is, there's a lot of pain in this book. I don't want to deceive readers, but the promise that I make to my readers is that when you go through it, you end up on the other side, right? There's something waiting, but you need to know, because it's not just how Ailey got to this point, it's how did this country get to this point? Okay, how did the Southern region get to this point? So the other thing I wanted is, I didn't want some little Black girl that we all have seen on TV or commercials or whatever, that is supposed to be the prettiest. Very light skin, silky hair, maybe even light-eyed. That doesn't mean that can't be a beautiful child. You know, I'm an older person, all children are beautiful, okay? But I wanted a child who was of my aesthetic, that I think is beautiful. Because when I was growing up, I was never jealous of light-skinned women. It was always girls that looked like Michelle Obama and Viola Davis, you know, Lupita, you know, Naomi Campbell. Those kind of women were the women that I felt were at the top of the beauty pinnacle, right? And so I wanted a deep cocoa brown nudging up against chocolate young girl, right? With coily hair, curly, but you can't pull a fine tooth comb through her hair, right? I wanted that. And I wanted her to be chubby. Because when I was growing up, when I would go visit my grandma, they would say nobody want a bone but a dog. That's rude. That's rude. But that's also very much an African aesthetic. When I went to Senegal as as I call it, and people in my community, a big fine woman, or we also used to say big boned, right? The men were all over me. Well, I've always had men all over me. I'm not trying to be arrogant, but I've never been a skinny woman. And I'm, sometimes I'm a little less chubby and sometimes I'm a little more chubby, but I've always had men of all races all over me. But, I wanted to have a girl like that so that Black women could see and Black girls could see themselves in this narrative. And they could root for her, and so that's why I chose Ailey. She's brilliant too, very smart girl, and she will cuss people out, and she's a regular sister, and I wanted that kind of woman.
No, and that's what a wonderful description. I think all of us listening now, for those of you who haven't read the book, you kind of have this picture of her now, and that was such a wonderful way to kind of set the scene for that. I'm curious. We've had a few questions here about the length of time you spent on this project. You've mentioned that it took about a decade to work on, but you've also mentioned your previous book, The Age of Phyllis, which is also kind of a masterwork, I believe.
I'm looking at the questions. Okay, go ahead.
I think you said you worked on that for 20 years in some way.
I worked on The Age of Phyllis for 15 years.
15 years. So obviously there was overlap on these projects, correct?
There was an overlap. I'm always working on 2 to 3 projects at the same time because I can get, I don't know if it's block, if it's, I'm not a lazy person. Now that I'm older, it's hard for me to have many tasks and just really focus on my writing. And so, I used to be a nighttime writer. But then now that I've gotten older, if something comes to me, it comes at like 4 o'clock in the morning. Somebody had asked in the chat, do I feel like God giving me these dreams and visions? Because sometimes I'll have dreams. Yes, I am a faithful person, but I'm also a pro-LGBTQ radical Black feminist. And I'm a Christian as well, a faithful Christian. And, I laugh and say, that's like jumbo shrimp. That's like an oxymoron. But it's a few of us out there, right? My God is a loving God, and there are no mistakes. Everybody who's on this earth was made to be that way. And so that's the way I feel about that thing there. But yeah, so I worked on The Age of Phyllis for 15 years, and I was in the archives for all of that time, right? Either virtually, and then when I went to Massachusetts, I was in physical archives. There's nothing better for someone who loves to research. It's just such a good feeling to be, sneezing from the dust and all, all of that kind of stuff. It's just a real good feeling. So, but I'd always written stories, Jeff, okay, on Chickasetta. From the time that I was in grad school, because I was at the University of Alabama. I was the only Black poet there, and they were mean to me. I know, I believe in forgiveness, and that's been a long time ago. But so, I don't have any rancor now, but I'm also not going to lie. They were very racist, and they were mean to me, the faculty as well as the students. And so I was very lonely at University of Alabama. And so I began to write this community of people to keep me company. Not my own relatives. I don't view that as ethical to take someone else's life and then just put a new name on it. I wouldn't want somebody doing that to my life. right? So I always had written the stories. And then what happened in 2005, run along, I got an agent, my agent, Sarah Burns, the great Sarah Burns. And that was in 2005. And I really liked her vibe. I go on feelings about people. And so when I told her I only wanted to write short stories, she told me, she said, there's no money in short stories. You can't make any money. And she, although she didn't say it, the implication was, if you don't make money, I don't make money, right? So, so I wanted to keep her because I really, really liked her. And then later on, I came to love her. I mean, I love her passionately now. And so I lied to her that I was going to write a novel. I didn't lie, I made the promise, but I was trying to sort of move around it, right? So I started writing these stories, new stories that were joined, but she was not fooled. She said, these are stories. Where's the novel? So I began to write Ailey's portion. And I always say, people laugh now because I was just trying to write a beach read. That's what I wanted. I wanted a beach read, a commercial beach read to hand to Sarah so she can make some money so I could go back to my stories, okay? Because that's what I wanted. And so run along, I was just writing the stories. And then I guess it was 2009 that I began crafting in earnest this, this novel, this kind of light novel. And her sister Lydia was in there and she was having problems, but it wasn't a big deal. It was, I don't know, these were shallow characters back then, I have to be honest. And then what happened, to refer to the kind person in the chat that asked about the dreams, I began having dreams of this place. And I knew it when, even in the dream, I knew it to be in the Deep South. And they would speak to me and we'd be having conversations, but I couldn't always understand what they were saying, but it didn't bother me. It was weird. And I'd wake up and words would come to me and I would write them down. At least 2 Indigenous characters came to me. At the time, keep in mind, I'm at University of Oklahoma and I'm teaching Indigenous students. And there was one student, I don't want to violate his privacy in particular. He was a sun dancer. And he was part Creek and part Winnebago. I believe there were no accidents. And he came to me in my office, 1 office hours. And keep in mind that I have been told by my family that I have Indigenous ancestry on both sides. But when you come to Oklahoma and you start talking about that, Native folks don't want to hear that. So I had sort of learned that I shouldn't refer to it, and I don't blame them. There's always some person talking about the Cherokee princess that they are, descended from, I don't blame them. They've lost a lot. And so, I was like, okay. And he came to my office and he said, I know you're Indian. Just all out in the blue. I know you're Indian. And I said, what? He said, you are Indian. And you can talk about you're only Black, but you are Indian. And if you do not honor your ancestors, they are coming for you. He said that before I started having those visions. So when I started, I was like, oh, what is happening? It was really scary, right? And then, I'd write things down. And then I said, but wait, I wasn't reared in the Native American culture. I don't have a right to do this. How am I gonna, and my, my Native American colleagues, right? Indigenous colleagues, they are going to drag me. I was really frightened. And then maybe a couple of years into this where I'm just going back and forth, I'm trying to write the stories, but I'm feeling nervous and frightened. It came to me that if everyone was mixed race Indigenous, maybe that was the permission that I could give myself to write those stories. If there were of a crossroads of blood, that would be okay. And that's how I was able. But then, Jeff, when I began doing research, I saw that there were policies and laws that would mention Native Americans and Africans together. And then when I researched the federal road, and the federal road that was forced through Native American lands, and where the American government was forcibly removing these people. That was also the same road that made the Deep South internal slave trade possible. So I started seeing all of these intersections, and I noticed that there were no other novels by Black people, okay, it was always one or two lines about Native Americans, if that. And then the Indians were gone. You're like, this is their land. What are you saying? Right? And I thought, you don't displace people from their own story.
Yeah.
And that's how I decided. I'm sorry, that was long-winded, but that's how I decided to do that.
Yeah. Well, what's fascinating about that to me, of course, is I was trying to think about what, when you read a book, whatever it is, I think we always sit down after we're finished and we think like, what do we think about the book? And then when you realize you loved a book or you liked a book, you kind of go, well, what did I like about that book? And then I start thinking, well, what's the common thread between the things I like? Why do I like the things I like? And what I love about this book is it has something in common with most of the books that I love, which is if someone were to ask me what it's about, to your point a moment ago, is it's kind of about everything, right? And it's like, it sounds kind of crazy to say that, but it really is. And you've touched on this because you're saying it's a story about America, but you've done something here that like, it's the greater than the sum of its parts, right? Because when you finish it and you put the last page turn, you kind of realize you've kind of gone on this journey. And yes, each character has their own narrative and there's all these different kind of subplots and different things, but the ultimate takeaway is that I think whoever you are, whether you're Indigenous or you're Black or you're this nerdy white guy who owns a bookstore in Tulsa, whatever you are, you're going to find something in this book that you relate to, something that you learn. And all those pieces, I think, add up to this pretty profound experience. And I guess my question beyond that compliment is, can you ever intend that? Or is in some way, is that the magic that happens when you kind of put all the pieces together?
I think it's the magic that happens. The book that was sold was 450 pages. So the book that Harper acquired was 450 pages. I wrote 350 new pages, well, probably about 250. And then I had stuff that I had been writing that I kept on the cloud that I didn't know how, and then it seemed, I was like, oh, okay. Like the part about Belle's childhood and Brown versus the Topeka Board of Education, right? Because I felt like there needed to be a flavor that people understood. It wasn't just the trajectory of history, because people, you have slavery, you have post-Reconstruction Jim Crow, you have segregation, you have white supremacist violence, right? You have that, And then you began to come into, you know, the 80s, the 90s, you have the crack epidemic, the vicious, virulent way that American government and local governments were dealing with that, which is very different from the way they're dealing with the opiate epidemic now. You know, and I think it's appropriate the way they're dealing with the opiate epidemic, but I also know it has to do with the fact that middle-class white kids are ODing, right? And so there's all of these sort of moving parts. That is what I was trying to do, but the whole journey issue is the epic.
Yeah.
I wanted to have my heroic, you know, my hero again to be a dark brown Black female. That's what I wanted.
Yeah, that's your Odysseus, right?
She is, Ailey is Odysseus.
Yeah.
And I have called it a kitchen table epic because the transitional moments, the pivotal moments, all of that, they take place in small spaces, bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchens, cars, you know, there's all of that, you know, it's very expansive. But because this is a woman's story, and I do admit a cisgender, you know, heterosexual woman's story, because that was the one thing I felt like I had already taken this big risk with the Indigenous storyline. I was scared. I didn't feel like I had the gifts yet, the skills yet to be able to go into an expansive LGBTQ storyline. I feel like I have that now. Yeah. Right? Because I've written LGBTQ characters in short stories, but I feel like, you know, now I have the skills, you know, because I just couldn't get that thing wrong. Yeah. You know, I couldn't get it wrong. So, but I wanted to have this story be the epic because Black women have done so much for this country. But we're always in the bed. And also the reason I call it a kitchen table epic, Black women have always been, I can't tell you number of times I have been at a reading in the Deep South, or sometimes other places, and an older white lady will come up to me and say, I remind her of her maid or her nanny. And I'm always in a beautiful outfit. I'm a Black woman of a certain age, and I am from the Deep South. I'm always going to be cute. We always going to be cute. So I'm always looking good, put together. And the first thing that she can say to me is I remind her of somebody that used to scrub her toilet, right? Mm-hmm. But that's the thing. We are, you know, always in the background, right? But what have we done for this country? I mean, we see right now, whoever anybody voted for, they need to know that the reason that Joe Biden is in the White House is because of Black women. Yeah. Black women, networks of Black women. And so did I know that that was going to be the case when I began? Like, there just seemed to be so much coalescing that I wasn't aware of, right? But I think that this is the moment for this kind of book. Yeah. Totally. Years ago, 3 years ago, it wouldn't have been the moment. But I think this is the moment for this kind of book.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we've got a few minutes left. I want to remind everybody, of course, to get your copy of the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. We're going to make it real easy for you in the chat right here. We'll put some links in there. You can do that. We're going to make Honorée the #1 bestseller in Oklahoma. And let's just shoot for the country as well.
Miss Pam rather, says, where is she from?
That's you, I'm guessing. Where are you from? Yes.
Okay, that's me. Where is she from? I am from Georgia. My mother's people are from Eatonton, Georgia. And so there is no Chickasetta on the map. I've had people try to find it on the map. There is no Chickasetta on the map, but there is a Putnam County where Chickasetta is located. And my mother's people are from Eatonton and Milledgeville, Georgia. And yes, Kala or Kayla, please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. I have researched my own family history. One of the things about researching African-American history is that you really can only go to maybe 1870. If you're lucky, you can find bills of sale, different things like that. But the census did not begin in the deep South. Now, up north, you have Black people who appear on John Peters, Phyllis Wheatley Peters' husband, appears on the 1790 Suffolk County, Massachusetts census, which to me was extraordinary, the 18th century. But there are no names. So as far as I can go is only 1870 on my mother's side. And there's more on my father's side, but those are, you know, I didn't have a relationship with them. So yes.
So we have a question here that touches on something I want to talk about too, which is, the question is, obviously the book's just out, but the question is about, are you already working on a sequel? But the question I want to ask you is this: you spent this much time on this book, and there's so much of you in it, and there's so much of the world in it. Do you see this book as kind of, I don't want to say your ultimate statement, right? But does it feel like the thing you've been working towards for your whole career? Meaning, do you feel like this is some kind of apex? Not that you're not going to do great work beyond this, but you know, the culmination.
I look at this as a plateau. It is not my apex. I do feel, though, Jeff, that this is the moment. Well, I actually felt that last year with The Age of Phyllis. This is the moment where I know what my purpose is as a writer. When you're younger, there used to be a term, I'm older than you, Jeff, we called it get in where you fit in back in the 70s, right? And so, you know, when you're first writing, you're just trying to, you know, get your voice out there and all of that. But when I look at the books that I've written, this is a natural moment. I've always written about Black women. I'm a radical Black feminist with a lot of love. All radical Black feminists that I know have a lot of love for our community, right? Because you can't leave the kids behind, and you can't leave your brethren behind, right? So I've always put a lot of fierceness into my work, but I've also always put a lot of vulnerability in my work. I was much angrier when I was younger. Okay. When I was in my 30s, I had a lot of rage, and you see that in the work. But as the years have gone by, you see tenderness more. That's one of the things in the book. You see tenderness for everyone. I was scared when I was writing, you know, the worst character in the book, Samuel Pinchard, that we have a story about how he became this monster. And when you see him as a child, I depict him with tenderness, because everybody was a child. And everybody who's abused as a child does not become that. So I wanted people to see that I had sympathy for this child before he became a monster. Yeah. And he became a monster. So yes, I feel like I'm rising, right? But I don't feel like this is the top. I write essays. The next book is essays. Yeah. And yes, I would not consider it a sequel, but there are Chickasetta stories that will be coming.
The Chickasetta Extended Universe? Is that what
the Chickasetta Extended Universe. And then I have 3 more novels that I have begun thinking about. So I hope to die with my boots on.
Yeah. We are, you know, I feel I'm a little jealous of the people that are watching that haven't read this book, because there's nothing quite like reading it for the first time. But it's also something that I know, this is true for my favorite books, my favorite films, my favorite, of course, music, and all these things, is you know that there's something you love because you go back to them often, you know?
I think you're making me feel so good.
I think that we're going to be spending a lot of time with this over the next years and decades. So I want to say a big thank you to everybody for watching. Make sure you get a copy of this, spend some time with it. Oprah has a kind of really cool club they're doing where you can kind of follow along.
Oprah's book club. And what
If you
Oprah
don't
is
feel like you
doing,
can gather, yeah.
oh, very quickly, Miss Oprah is got, instead of chapter by chapter, she's doing themes.
Yeah.
So there are going to be themes. And then I'm not sure, but I might be popping my head in, you know, so.
But it's a great way to kind of do this book with your community in this moment where we aren't gathering all together, but you can really kind of bond with your other readers. So guys, make sure you pay attention to that. And Honorée, what an honor for us to do this with you. And I hope we get to meet in person very soon.
I hope so. I pray that will happen very soon. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And everybody take care, stay safe, and we will see you guys soon. Enjoy reading. Bye-bye.